All right, folks, it is definitely a Wednesday morning, and it is time for World Edition. And we've definitely got a lot of things going on in the world on October 25th. And we'll definitely be talking about a number of these things that are happening. Of course, we do know that the war is continuing in Israel, and we're definitely seeing some interesting comments from what is going on there, as apparently the Israel UN ambassador is demanding that the UN Secretary General resigned after what they called a shocking speech and all along those lines. So Israel has rejected a call for a ceasefire in Gaza at a major UN meeting. And like I said, definitely the UN has criticized Israel and definitely also talked about a British cargo ship that has sunk as well. And of course, there's other things that are going on in that space as well. Turkish president at a talk that he was given, Tayyip Erdogan has called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Erdogan is claiming that Hamas is not a terrorist, but a mujahideen defending their land, and canceled an Israeli trip. So he says that there is Western silence is worsening humanitarian situation in Gaza. Apparently, that's what he told Putin over there in Russia. But like I said, folks are having all kinds of thoughts about what is going on in that part of the world. And apparently, some Muslims and Arab Americans are furious with President Biden over Israel support, over his support of Israel. And Biden asked if he's pressing Israel to delay the Gaza invasion, said they can make their own decisions. So that is what he says. And the Saudi crown prince has indicated that Israel normalization can resume after the war. So he's saying that that can resume after the war, but not at this particular time, and all along those lines. Over there in Finland, Finland is saying that a Hong Kong flagged ship anchor breached the pipeline. So they are saying that the gas pipeline over there was likely broken by a ship's dragging anchor. And Finland is blaming Chinese ship for Baltic Sea gas pipeline damage. So that is what is going on as well. And like I said earlier, in terms of the Middle East, Israel is ramping up its airstrikes on Gaza ahead of their planned invasion. So that is something else that we are seeing in the news as well. So there's definitely that going on. And Venezuela's Machado has won the presidential primary, and definitely that is what the near final count shows. So, and the Venezuelan government is escalating attacks on opposition's primary election as turnout tops the forecast. But looks like Machado win has been confirmed in the Venezuela vote, despite the other candidate, Maduro, calling it a fraud. I think we heard something similar like that even here in the United States. So we're definitely going to be possibly talking about that as well. And in news coming out of Russia and Ukraine, Russia defense minister is visiting the Ukraine military zone. So that is something that we are seeing, as well as I guess they are preparing for their winter preparations of what they're going to do on this war that has been going on for over a year now, and all along those lines. So we're definitely going to have some conversations around that as well. And definitely, there are a number of other things that are going on in the world, and we'll definitely be getting to those also and seeing what folks have got to say about these various conversations. The weather is in the news, and we did have somebody that was in the climate space yesterday, but Hurricane Tammy is becoming a Category 2 hurricane on a path that may eventually lead to Bermuda, and who knows, it might even strike parts of North Carolina where me and Nick and others are as well. And there was another storm that was brewing as well. I think that was in another part of the world, that's being Hurricane Otis, that apparently tore through a very popular vacation destination, that being Acapulco, as a Category 4 storm. So they went through there and definitely had that kind of weather as well. So definitely that is going on. And speaking of Israel and the Israel Hamas conflict, there was actually a freed hostage that offered a handshake. So one of the people that was definitely in the older category, Yashavid Lifshitz, 85, is claiming that she was treated well after enduring hell. And I'm assuming that she probably gave some sort of olive branch back to that terrorist organization and all along those lines. But we'll definitely get to some conversations around that and some other things that are going on as well. We do know a lot's going on in terms of the situation in our United States government as well, because definitely there are a number of Trump allies that are turning their back on him in some ways, or at least that's what some people may be thinking, and all of that sense. So with a plea deal in the Georgia Trump case, Fani Willis is apparently building momentum. So we're definitely seeing that. And Jenna Ellis has entered a plea deal in the Georgia election interference case, and that is something else that's going on. And we're seeing that Trump is backing Mike Johnson for the House Speaker. So I think we're down to like the fourth speaker now. So we'll see whether this speaker can win, because apparently Mike Johnson is a Trump ally. We know that Jim Jordan, I believe, was a Trump ally as well. But this will be the fourth one that they will try to get to be the person that will be running the House. And he is a Louisiana Republican. So we'll see how this all plays out. And we finally get some order in that whole area of the House and all in that kind of way. And speaking of the weather, as I did earlier, apparently, and it's hard to believe because yes, it is already October, so maybe it isn't that hard to believe, but the first significant winter storm of the season could dump foots of snow across parts of the northern tier of the United States. So it looks like we might be getting some snow in those rocky parts of the United States, and we'll see how that turns out as well. So one of the other things, coming back to the political lane, is that I'm hearing is that definitely there is some conversation in Politico and other publications about how the Republicans are tearing themselves to pieces as they are trying to figure out who's going to be leading them and all along that kind of sense. As a matter of fact, there was a very interesting comment made by a U.S. Republican woman candidate. She was saying that they are too smart to want the job, and that's why there are no women running for Speaker of the House. And she actually made the comment that they're wiser and all along those lines. So I guess she's saying that we're not going to be jumping into this fray. You men can have it all day long. We don't see any reason to jump into this particular fray and all along those lines. And last but not least, there is a political leader, somebody that some folks have even tossed around the idea of being president and all along those lines, but he is having a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, that being California Governor Gavin Newsom. So he was having a meeting, and he even signed a memo of understanding with the Chinese government and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see what folks have to say about that as well. So I'm going to bring in my esteemed panel, and all along those lines, we've also got a guest, and they are actually a guest that is in a whole different lane. So I'll bring them in very quickly, and then of course we'll get into some of the conversations around world politics as well. But I do have Ellen Albertson on as well, so I want to spend at least a few minutes with her as well. So Ellen, if you could just share a little bit about what you got going on. I've talked about all these world issues, and I know that one thing you talk about is the midlife crisis and then things of that nature, more from a women perspective. And I just mentioned the thing around women leadership and how there are some women that don't want to jump into this political fray all along those lines. But I just wanted your thoughts, because a lot of times as we get older, we start wondering, what is the next phase and all in that space. And definitely I am in my early 60s, so I definitely know about that midlife space, but definitely still have a nice family unit and still have a mother and dad who are in the elderly space, but they are still very active and still doing a lot of things in society. But I'd love to hear about what you've got going on and what the Midlife Whisperer is all about.
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's nice to add a little bit of levity to all of the heaviness that's going on in the world. But, I think midlife is such a powerful time. And I love that you brought up that idea of crisis. But I think that, we need to sort of reframe that and see, how do we use this period of midlife, sort of our 40s and our 50s, to reinvent ourselves and transform ourselves so that we can have a great, what I like to call the second adulthood, right? We've got this sort of first adulthood, like our 20s or 30s, and then maybe into the 40s, but then we've got 50s, 60s, 70s. People are living longer. So my mission is really to help people to rock midlife. And I do that with 7 different steps, which are to know yourself. So knowing yourself is really important, because I think what happens is people reach midlife and it feels like they're kind of been climbing up this ladder or crawling up this ladder of success, right? They get to the top of the building, they look around, it's like, well, I'm not happy. That's where the crisis piece comes in. But instead of having that crisis, having that affair, getting the sports car, whatever that is, you take a look and say, okay, I am not in alignment with what I want in my life, and what are the changes I need to know. And that really starts with knowing yourself. The second step is loving yourself. So loving who you are. And in that step, I really teach people something called self-compassion, which is treating yourself the way you would a good friend. And then the next step is energizing yourself. So I have been a registered dietitian for 30 years. I'm a board certified health and wellness coach. And so this is where I help people with their physical well-being, because if you're not healthy, which the body starts to, whisper to you if you haven't been taking care of yourself with your diet, with your movement, managing stress, getting sleep. This is where you have to kind of take a look at your body, particularly women, because women are transitioning through menopause. And so there's a lot of hormonal changes that cause issues with the body and with the brain as well. And then the fourth step is to reprogram your brain. So there's a concept called neuroplasticity, where you can keep, your thoughts elevated with things like positive affirmations, with, questioning your beliefs, really transforming the literal structure of your brain, which can transform how you act in the world and how you feel. They're all interrelated. So as you work on your mind, your brain changes, your mind feels different. You change it like a record, you change the groove. So maybe you're playing one record and you want a new record, you can change the grooves of your brain. Then there's empowering yourself, which is really all about finding power from within yourself, doing those things that really light you up, those things that have kind of been on your vision board. You finally okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to step outside my comfort zone and make something happen. And then 6 is rehabbing your relationships, because what happens is you become that butterfly and you're transforming, but the people in your life still think that you're that caterpillar. So they try to pull you back into their reality, because we see things as we are, not as they are. And then the last step is enlightening yourself. So that is all about finding your passion, your purpose, finding meaning, connecting with a spiritual practice. So those are the 7 steps that I help people with. I also have something called Rockstar Readings, which is basically finding your universal blueprint, which is based on the I Ching and your astrology. And I give some coaching. So you can find all of that on my website, which is themidlifewhisperer.com. That's themidlifewhisperer.com.
And along those same lines, just really quickly and everything, one of the other things that I was curious about is as you hit midlife, and one thing you just said that I definitely agree with, because like I said, I consider myself, even though I'm 61, to be in midlife, because I sometimes think that those categories have changed, because you mentioned 40s and 50s, and definitely, I guess at that time I was in my midlife, but since we are aging and living longer, I'm actually thinking 60s and 70s is actually closer to midlife and all along those spans. But I was just wondering your thoughts around that, because we definitely are a Asian society. I know that there are a lot of young people as well, but there are also some stereotypes that go on, because I know that with the elderly population, there is a belief that once you get a certain age, you are stuck in your ways, stuck in your beliefs, and that you can't even change those ways and beliefs. And I've actually seen some people even change their thoughts around some political lanes as well. And you heard me talk about that earlier and everything, but I just wonder your thoughts around that, and also around intimacy and sexuality, because I've also heard that some people are thinking that they are done in that category when they get older, and I don't necessarily believe in that philosophy either. But there is a stereotype, as you just mentioned earlier, particularly with women and menopause, that they are, there's that old stereotype, I hate to put it, of the old hag or something like that, that they're not engaged and they're not involved, and I don't think that that is a fair assessment.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I don't know what the label we want to put when the time of midlife is. I mean, I do think about it as sort of your 50s, but I think the more important question is, are you living your best life? Are you happy? Are you feeling fulfilled? So I think that, as you said, Mark, any point along the way, we can always learn new things. We can change our belief systems. We can transform our bodies. We can be healthier. And so midlife is really this time of kind of going the caterpillar to the butterfly, right? Who do you want to be in this great second half of your adulthood? And I think that, as you mentioned, Mark, it's because, we are living longer. Up until recently, people died in their 50s. So we didn't have this period of life. Now we're living into our 80s, 90s. My parents are 91 and 93, and they are still rocking it. They're slowing down a little bit, but they're definitely rocking it. And, as far as intimacy is concerned, I think you initially contacted me because of this show that's a huge hit called The Golden Bachelor, which is about this 73-year-old man, Gary. It's that bachelor where you've got 22 women and he gets to, I guess, connect with one of them and eventually marry one of them. And it's like so cool to see that love has no age limit. Like myself personally, I was married for 25 years. I got divorced. And now I've been with a wonderful man for the last, 3+ years, and we're super happy together. So I think, love is something we all need more of in the world, particularly when we take a look at what's going on in the world. We need to love ourselves. We need to have great relationships. And as far as the sexuality piece, thank you, pharmaceuticals. I'm not always the biggest fan of a lot of pharmaceuticals. Like we could talk another segment about what's going on with the all of these obesity drugs that are sort of hitting the market that we have no idea like what they're going to do in the long term and if they're really helping people's health, because people might be like, I can eat whatever I want because I'm taking these medications now. But that being said, for women, if it's the right decision for you, hormone replacement therapy can really help with a lot of these symptoms like hot flashes and vaginal dryness and mood swings, sleep issues. There's other medications that you can take. There's also natural remedies, eating a whole food plant-based diet. That's the diet for everybody to be eating. And then, also we've got Viagra, right? For the guys too. So I think sexuality changes. I know I can speak for myself. My perspective of it has changed. It's much more of a bonding connection. It's a deep, profound connection. So we can still rock it, at midlife. And I think that's mindset too. And I think we also need to sort of, work on our body image, how we changing our looks. I sometimes see women, I don't know if it's the same for men, that are like trying to keep the same look that they had when they were 26 or getting a ton of plastic surgery, which that's a choice. You can do it, but kind of upgrading your look to be more in alignment with who you are and who you're becoming. So it is my book really lays it all out and what you can do. And the beauty of Rock Your Midlife is that you can pick it up and follow any of the 7 steps. So I personally started with the self-love because I think that has to be kind of your focal point, because when you love yourself, you stop doing those things that insult your soul. You stop those old habits, behaviors, whether that's something with your body, your relationships, you create boundaries. You start attracting what is truly in your best interest. So that self-love, which is about practicing self-compassion, is really powerful. But I agree with you, Mark. I'm having the time of my life. I think midlife can be a really wonderful period of time. I mean, I think we're transitioning and facing things like empty nest and aging parents, and there's financial pressures and maybe job pressures, but it's a really powerful time to work on yourself and do more of what brings you joy and makes you happy.
No, that makes a lot of sense and everything. I know that during the pandemic, a lot of people were getting into this kind of spirituality and the kind of like healing space and a lot of things along those lines. We saw a lot of people that were starting to follow back into astrology, but also falling into some of the Eastern religions and Eastern thoughts and all along those lines. I was just wondering your thoughts around that, because we definitely saw a kind of people not so much claiming back into religion, but definitely claiming back into spirituality. And I saw a lot of people that were trying to find their, lack of a better term, purpose in life and all along those lines. And a lot of people were getting into yoga and a number of other things that are more Eastern related. But I was just wondering your thoughts around that, particularly during this last 3 years, as I think that there was a shift where people were going into that kind of healing space.
Yeah, there certainly is a greater shift. I think that with the world sometimes feeling like it's hell in a handbasket, I think we're looking for ways to connect with our soul. We're looking for purpose. We're looking for meaning. And spirituality is really all about finding purpose and meaning. And so all of the various, religions and techniques such as yoga are all about helping us to find that connection with the divine within, the divine without. We truly are part of all that is. And I think that, myself, I'm seeing an interest in what's called, quantum physics, where we're realizing that we are energy and we are matter, and that our thoughts actually create our reality, and that our emotions actually magnetize what it is that we truly want. So, if you're vibing all the time with the world's horrible and you're looking at media all the time, it's important to know what's going on. And I appreciate what you bring to the table, helping people to be aware. But we also need to turn that off and just like connect with ourselves, connect with nature, connect with our pets, our loved ones. So I think people also, they're looking for spirituality because we're stressed. We're very stressed out. The kind of lives we're living are not perhaps what our bodies were designed to do. So I think people are looking for answers, for purpose, for meaning. Certainly astrology. I'm an astrologer myself. I love reading people's charts. It's a great way to just take a snapshot of what was the energy at the moment I was born. What's my curriculum? And I'm offering these rockstar readings to help people really understand themselves on a deeper level. You can find those on my website, which is again, themidlifewhisperer.com, under services. If you're interested in like, who am I? What's my purpose? Where do I find meaning in my life? I'm here to help people at midlife try to figure it out and give them a bit of a blueprint to know themselves better, love themselves more, feel more energized. Because, we're here to make a difference. And then the Dalai Lama says the Western woman will save the world. And he's talking about us. He's talking about the midlife women, I'm sure men as well. But midlife women, all of us at midlife, we're so wise. We've been around the block. I'm always it's always so funny when I see life coaches who are like 20. I'm like, honey, you haven't lived, right? We're wise. We know things. And we influence up to 4 generations. So we've got our grandkids, our kids, our peers, our parents. So we are very, very powerful.
Well, and definitely going to bring in some of the other guests. And of course, we're also going to talk about other world issues as well. But definitely, I've been enjoying this conversation, but I'm sure they might have some questions for you as well. But I know one of the things that Nick Palveda talks about on a regular, and he's one of our founders here on the network, is education and what we are not teaching in the schools and all along those lines. So I'm sure you might have some thoughts around that. And you also mentioned the pharmaceuticals and some of the things that are out there, because I do know there are a number of people that are into weight diets and things along those lines, and they're trying to lose weight in that space. I know that I probably need to lose a few pounds as well, but sometimes when you need to lose those pounds, you're tempted to get those drugs. And I sometimes wonder about the power of the pharmaceutical industry, even in the weight industry as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around that. You kind of alluded to it earlier, and I'm definitely going to bring up Nick, and I think I've got Toby, and they may have some, and even Steve Rao, who is one of our other regular hosts and everything, and they may have some questions for you as well. But
well,
hey, Dr. Ellen, I do have some comments about getting older. When you get older, you get richer. You get gold teeth, silver hair, precious kidney stones, and more gas than Saudi Arabia. So getting older actually can be a very beneficial thing to do. But maybe the thing is that your new book you get older, you get screwed. I mean, something like that. But I don't know. I just go, well, it is what it is. And one thing, today, you're the youngest you're ever going to be, believe it or not.
So but in age it's a number. I mean, I'm 60 and I feel great. So I think that we can feel great. I mean, we have to work on our physical vitality, but people, I like the Golden Bachelor, because you're seeing people falling in love. We don't lose that connection with our heart. They're playing pickleball, they're riding on motorcycles, they're doing all of this great, cool stuff. And I think we're here to create a new reality of what this phase of life looks like.
Yeah, I left 60 a long time ago, but that's a whole nother story.
That's a whole other story. But just really quickly, I was asking about the nature of the pharmaceuticals in the diet industry. That was the one thing I was going to ask.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that we're putting a lot of these in the pipeline. They're super expensive. I mean, they're injectables, and I believe you need to. It's like around $800, $1,000 a month. So it's gonna, if the doctors start prescribing these things like crazy, it's going to really raise our healthcare costs. I read somewhere that they're thinking that if they do put these all in the pipeline and they're prescribing them like crazy, it's going to be 50% increase in the healthcare costs of our country, which is huge. And then I question too, I mean, like with children, these things are affecting your brain. It's affecting your appetite mechanism. So we don't know. I mean, it was saying one of the side effects is facial aging. So what's going on inside your body if you're taking these things? You're supposed to take them for the rest of your life. And here's the thing. You can be healthy and lose weight by following a healthy diet. You don't need to go on a diet. If you take a look at sort of there's that documentary in the book, Healthy at 100, right? They're all eating whole food, plant-based. basing your diet around plants. Plants have what's called fiber, which fills you up without filling you out. It doesn't have any calories. It gives you that satiety. It contains lots of what's called phytochemicals, which are good for your body. So, it's manyfold. It's the healthcare costs. It's what else is it doing to people's bodies? And then it's the fact, are people going to be ignoring a healthy diet? And are we ignoring our food system, which is a mess, right? If people were not eating potato chips and all of those things so much, I'm not saying you can't ever have those things, but if people had access to healthy food, if they were taught how to incorporate it into their diet, and then good for you, if we changed our food system and our ways of eating, we wouldn't need these drugs. So we're not looking like the man who's written this Healthy at 100. He's actually going into towns and transforming them. He's creating a different environment by bringing in healthy food, giving people cooking lessons, having all kinds of exercise activities, in a social space in communities. But we need to change the infrastructure in terms of making it really easy for people to take care of themselves. So I feel like we're going down the wrong track with these pharmaceuticals, and it's concerns me because there's so many times the pharmaceuticals come out in a big way, and 20 years later, 10 years later, we're like, oh my God, look what these do. So
yeah, just really quickly, and then I know, like I said, Jacoby and even Steve may have some questions, and we'll get back to some of the other conversations around what's going on in the world as well. But just really quickly, you mentioned a field that I know sometimes people will tease about, because I actually believe in some of the traits, and like I said, I'm a cancer, and I believe that some of the traits that cancers are supposed to have that I have, and I know that my brother has, and actually he's celebrating a birthday on tomorrow, that he has some of the traits of a Scorpio on a regular basis. But I also know that when I read the ones in the newspapers, they're just generalizations and all along those lines. So I was just wondering some of your own thoughts around astrology, because I definitely think that there may be some facts to some of the things that are going on with the stars and the moon and all of that is part of astrology. But sometimes people are like, this can't be real, because it's only some generalizations, particularly when they look at the ones in the newspaper and all along those lines. So I was just wondering your thoughts, because it is a field that gets a lot of critique, and some people don't see it as quote unquote real science.
Yeah, well, I think for me as a life coach, and I'm also a PhD psychologist, I look at astrology as another lens to understand yourself, and for me to understand my clients. And so when you look in the newspaper, it's just your sun sign. Your sun sign, it's part of your astrology, your astrological chart, and it's about, how do you shine? What's your purpose? But you've also got all of these other planets, your moon sign, what's called your rising sign, where the other planets, Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, where were Chiron, where were all of those planets when at the moment that you were born. So it's kind of like, I look at the astrological chart as this is your curriculum. So a whole lot of people can take calculus, right? And they're all going to study it differently. They're all going to get different grades. They're all going to use it in different ways in your life. So it's just another tool to understand yourself, because at the moment of your birth, there are certain energies. When we know, for example, like the moon, we know that the moon impacts people's moods. Just look at the emergency room. There's a full moon. A lot more people are in the emergency room. People's moods, because we're water, and we know the moon affects tides, are impacted by the phases of the moon. So at the moment of your birth, there's all of these energies, gravitational forces that are impacting when you take that first breath. And so I don't look at it as I look at it as just a way, not to, tell the future, but to look at it and go like, I'm a Leo rising. So I love being in front of a camera. You can see I'm on the camera and I light up and I love it. I love to dance. I love to do things on Instagram. I'm a Sagittarius. So it's like, I want adventure. I pull my arrow back. So it's very multifaceted. And the problem with what's happening when you look at, your horoscope in the newspaper is it's just one little snippet, and it's not giving you the full spectrum, all the facets of who you are. So it's just a fantastic lens. That's why I'm doing these rockstar readings, because I use them with my clients, and I really see that it helps them understand themselves, and it helps me understand what their strengths are, what they're awesome at, what their purpose is. So there's a lot more to it than just what you read in the newspaper.
That makes a lot of sense. Toby, you have any questions? And like I said, we'll definitely get to some of the other world issues as well. But you've been listening. I know you've always got some insightful questions as well.
Um, First off, welcome.
Thank you.
And glad to have you here because I love this topic. Um, I know Reader's Digest always has a section in their has a column in their magazine that always says laughter is the best medicine. Um, how and there were certain things you were talking about spirituality, finding that inner peace and helps with the midlife crisis. Are there things that I guess could parallel and work with children as well?
Well, I think all of the steps in my book, people have said to me before that, Ellen, all of your steps work for everybody. You don't have to be a certain age. I mean, certainly knowing yourself. I think, when kids are born, they have a certain energy, what they're good at. And often, society, teachers, parents tell them, let's say they want to be an artist and their parents like, no, that you can't make money being an artist. So they kind of deep six their dream. So knowing yourself, and certainly that self-compassion piece, that loving yourself, treating yourself the way you would a good friend, being kind to yourself rather than judgmental, understanding that when you make a mistake, when you fail, when you feel inadequate, that's normal. We all are imperfect beings. This is common humanity, that it's okay to make mistakes and fail. And then there's this mindfulness piece to self-compassion, which is noticing. If kids notice, like, oh my God, I'm upset right now, I'm suffering. Who can I talk to? What can I do? How can I self-soothe myself when I'm going through things? So yes, teaching children, and actually the Mindful Self-Compassion program, which I'm trained in, actually has a program for children and teens. I wish I had had that when I was this type A personality, getting into the best schools, wanting more degrees and, really climbing up this ladder of success. I wish I had known myself and followed what was right in my heart, knew how to find that, and also loved myself enough to learn how to treat myself well. Certainly the Energize Yourself, again, it's that whole food plant-based diet. And there are some schools where my kids went, there was a kindergarten teacher there who they had a garden in the school. They're teaching kids about healthy eating, how to cook. So certainly the importance of movement. So we need to teach young people like how to eat right and take care of their bodies. These are like basic things that everybody should know. How to, work with your brain, your thoughts, how to keep your thoughts positive, what to do when you with self-belief. And, I think we focus a lot on self-esteem, but the self-compassion piece is more powerful. Learning to walk productively with your mind, having kids feel empowered to make their own decisions, learning about relationships and how they can get their needs met. So yeah, there's a lot, all of these steps, all 7 steps pretty much help every human at any age, but I kind of have them focused on how it pertains to midlife.
Hey, Dr. Ellen, there's a term that's out there. Speaking of midlife and everything, I would actually argue that some of our political leaders may be going through it. I'm getting ready to mention as well and everything. But there's a term called midlife crisis. And I know that is when people are, maybe they're frustrated by their job and they just decide to walk off the job, or they decide to get into these affairs, or they decide to do a number of other things. So I was just wondering, in your mind, is that a real situation, and is that something that folks need to face both as men and women? Because I have definitely heard about people that just up and quit their job, or up and do this, or they up and leave their families because they are having quote unquote a midlife crisis. And I sometimes wonder if that is a actuality, or if that's a crutch that some people use as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around that, because that is something I've heard in a number of conversations.
Well, it's interesting when you Google midlife, it's conjoined with crisis. So in our culture, we have this idea that midlife is a time of crisis. The reality is that term was coined by a Canadian psychologist in the 60s to pertain to men who had the quintessential buy the red sports car and, run off with your massage therapist, which does happen, but it's rare. It's less than 10%. And so I think what's happening on a deeper level is that, especially with women, we feel really unseen. We feel like, I'm not my cute little perky 20, 30 something, and I'm not seen. And maybe, as well in the boardroom, they're feeling like, yeah, I'm not seen. That's that whole leaning in, being seen, feeling important. So I think as Brene Brown says, it's not a crisis. A crisis is a short-lived thing. It's really, she calls it more of an unraveling. And I think about, again, that chrysalis, right? We're weaving this chrysalis, this cocoon, where we need to find a safe space to do this transformation so that we're feeling good about who we are, finding purpose, meaning, making a difference in the world. So to answer your question, I mean, it's a really small part. I would say I think that the actual statistic is like 7-8% of people go through what we think about as a midlife crisis. But the reality of it is, and again, I'm thinking more for women than men, because that's who I work with, but it's really more of a loss of identity. We don't feel like ourselves. The old things that were working for us aren't working anymore. Plus, we've got the situational pieces like empty nest or teenagers, aging parents. Maybe we're grappling with our finances and thinking about retirement. Can I retire? The work that once lit us up isn't lighting us up. I think for women, it's a little bit more about the visual. Women, we've been taught that the most important thing is our looks. So as we go through midlife, we get wrinkles and gray hair and all of the things. For men, I think it's more of a sense of loss of power, I think, particularly in the workplace. I see men who they've changed a lot, but they don't that visual piece, that body image piece, or what's going on with, how they look, their face, their hair isn't as big an issue. So for women, a lot of it is the body image and their looks. For men, I think it's more of like a loss of power and significance and relevancy in their lives.
Along those same lines and everything, I know that one of the things as we get older that we start thinking about, well, there are two things. And one I know that Nick brings up regularly and everything is our financial health and all along those lines. Because a lot of times we have not planned enough to be prepared for retirement and to be prepared for later life and all along those lines. So I know that that's something that Nick, who was here earlier, speaks to, because that is definitely something we need to have taught in the schools. And he's the founder of, or one of the founders of Pod TV. But I know there's also the sense of mortality. I mean, we are all human beings that are born, and at some point we will pass away and die as well. But most of us, myself included, are trying to make it to be 200. And I know that there's conversations around immortality drugs and all along those lines, even though I don't think that they are factual and all in that space. But I'm just wondering, is that part of the midlife situation as well, is that we are thinking about what the end will look like?
I don't know. I don't find it as much, no, because I feel like that's more, when we get to that elder space. I mean, I think that what I find, what I feel is that we see that we're running out of time, because when you reach midlife, you realize that there is less time in front of you than behind you. And so the universe is like, come on, wake up. You've got this thing to do. If your soul decided that, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z in this lifetime, and it's not happening, whether that is, I really want to be in a great romantic relationship, I really want to, do this work in the world, I think it's a bit of a wake-up call that I'm running out of time. So we have to stop, wasting time. And I think you start to, I know for myself, just the appreciation, the gratitude for every day. I actually got a breast cancer diagnosis April of 2022, which was a huge wake-up call for me, because I'm the healthiest person I know, but I found out I had a BRCA mutation. It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So for the women, and men can get breast cancer too, or listening, get your mammogram, I was diagnosed early, I'm fine. But that was a bit of a wake-up call too. Like, nobody gets out of here alive. And having had a cancer diagnosis was a real wake-up call for me. And I know for a lot of women who are, have health issues, to really take the bull by the horns and make the most of your life. I just bought a home in Costa Rica. I wouldn't have done that, I don't think, had I not gone through that diagnosis, because it was like, wow, life is short. Go and rock it.
That makes sense. And speaking of cancer diagnosis and everything, and I know Jatovi is aware of this as well, we just actually lost an icon in the African-American circle and all along those lines. And he was an icon that was very much involved in what some people call blaxploitation films and a number of other films, including Roots and everything, that being Richard Roundtree. And it is my understanding that he actually passed of pancreatic cancer. So he was actually fighting the cancer battle as well. And he just passed away on yesterday and all along those lines. So Jatovi, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that or any other questions, but I did know that he had recently passed, and he is an icon in our community, particularly around movies and everything.
I guess tie that in to the discussion, for a lot of people, that's trauma, and that traumatic situation a lot of people currently are going through. And if you think about cultures or even societies themselves. Right now, with even overseas, with all the traumatic situations that individuals are going through, be it the Palestinian, be it the Jewish community, be it the Israelis, be it the Ukrainians, even the innocent, even those innocent Russian civilians that are all, I mean, there's trauma that's happened. And to tie it into what you're talking about, Dr. Ellen, how can, I mean, what are some best ways or best practices for individuals to utilize to help themselves, not only in a midlife crisis, because that trauma is probably magnifying that midlife crisis itself, but to navigate themselves through trauma?
Yeah, well, I would say, if it's truly trauma, get a professional. So seeing a therapist to do that. I think that when I work with people, the first piece is to notice when you're triggered. So trauma, we create trauma to protect ourselves. It's like a shell. You were saying like the crab, right? We feel some difficult emotion, like let's say we're a kid and our parents fought all the time, and maybe we literally like shut down, went into a closet. So when there's fighting, we go into this trauma, and instead of dealing and healing it, we retreat into our shell. And so it never gets resolved. So there's this great opportunity around doing shadow work or trauma work where you are pausing, noticing, oh my goodness, I'm triggered right now. Maybe I'm having a fight with my partner, saying that piece about having, you get triggered by fighting because your parents were fighting when you were a kid and you withdrew. So noticing, going, okay, I'm triggered right now. How do I care for myself? Going back to that self-compassion piece. And so what I use a technique that I call name it, you tame it. So noticing this is fear, this is anger, this is sadness, this is grief, whatever it is, noticing the emotion and you name it instead of just going into your old ways of dealing. We learn to care for ourselves by maybe we eat, maybe we drink, maybe we shop, we game, we watch television, we do all of these things to ignore the feeling. But if we name the feeling, we bring it into the frontal cortex of our brain and we can work on that feeling. Now, and then after we name it, we tame it, we feel it, we heal it. Feeling it in your body. Emotions are felt experiences in your body. So maybe you feel fear in your stomach. You feel, a tightness there, or in your heart or your throat. You're trying to like speak your truth, have a conversation with your spouse instead of fighting and saying, honey, I want to talk about this, instead of retreating or shutting down. So it's a matter of, caring for ourselves and then just being there for ourselves to soothe ourselves. So we need to find true ways to self-soothe. Now, I'm not saying, that's a little, it's for trauma that people are experiencing, that's helpful. But a lot of people, again, need a professional to work with them. There's lots of great techniques out there to bring up the situation and help you through it in a safe place and way. And certainly what's going on in world politics, I don't have an answer to the trauma that's creating for innocent people, whether that's Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Gaza, especially, children. That's going to, cause a lot of obviously physiological and psychological pain, emotional pain.
Yeah, speaking of which and everything, and definitely there'll be a lot of playing there and everything, but I actually saw something interesting, and Sasha may have some thoughts around this as well, and it was actually on social media, and I know what you said earlier about sometimes you got to turn off social media and all along those lines, Dr. Ellen, but it was an interesting parallel, and it was a parallel between what's going on, because we've definitely seen a high death toll in Ukraine and a high death toll in Russia as well, and now there is a death toll that is starting to climb in the nation of Israel, as well as the Palestinian area of Gaza and all along those lines. But what I heard that was very interesting, and it was in social media, was there was somebody that was complaining about a African nation that has a high genocide rate as well. And they were feeling that we were not paying any attention to that. And that is the Congo, because apparently the Congo is having some very high statistics and all along those lines. And this has been going on for decades. I know we sometimes talk about what's been going on between Israel and Palestine, but apparently it was in like the million category, and I don't have that particular Instagram or Facebook or whatever I was looking at that time. But I did think it was a valid point because, like I said, we sometimes focus on whatever the kind of like the focal points are and what the media is making the focal points, and we sometimes ignore and neglect some of the other focal points. So while it might be some other trauma that folks are having that are connected to that region, I think it's a legitimate point. But I don't know if Jacoby or Nick or even Sasha have any thoughts around that, because I was startled when I saw the numbers that had been there and everything. And I'm just being very transparent because, like I said, I forgot the exact numbers, but it was definitely in the millions, and it's been going on for decades and everything. But I didn't know if anybody, because it is the World Edition, had any thoughts around that.
Well, I mean, you look at fentanyl, Mark. How many people, Dr. Ellen, died of fentanyl overdoses last year? About 100,000 in the United States. And how many, has 100,000 people died in the Israel-Gaza conflict yet? 100,000? No. But 100,000 people did die in the United States of America through fentanyl overdose. So we don't tend to numerically state, well, this is a higher problem than that because of numbers. Because if you looked at the numbers, you're going to say that fentanyl dwarfs what is going on right now in Israel and Gaza. It's not even close. And it's something that we can actually control, or something that we should address as a country. Over there, frankly, Israel will take care of business. I mean, the way I look at, they'll handle that. So, you know, you can jump up and down. It's great for media, but it's going to be handled. The fentanyl crisis is a whole different cat. I'm not sure how we're going to address this huge amount of drug overdose on apparently very deadly drug that's in the United States. So I think that that issue should be brought up by the media every day, and they won't, because it doesn't sell. Remember, the media is all about what sells, what leads.
If it leads, it leads, right?
It leads, right. And dead bodies being carted off to a hospital in the United States because of the overdose is like, okay, another story. Here, another problem. I'm glad you visited Costa Rica. Another problem, okay? The United States, violent crime, it's 10 times greater that you get killed here than you will in the European Union. And so when I was in Spain, I was very safe. 0.08, never heard murders. Go to the United States, it's 10 times greater. But you go to where you at in Latin America, it's worse. And in our own backyard, we have some very serious problems in terms of the amount of drug crimes and violence exist from El Salvador to Mexico to Venezuela, which is a failed state that has more oil than Saudi Arabia. So why do we even give a rat's rear about Saudi Arabia? We should give a rat's rear about Venezuela, which is it's in our backyard, Mark, as you well know, and it has more oil reserves than Saudi Arabia, yet they're all broke.
Well, I mean, I think the tough thing is we have to be careful about pitting things against each other, and they're all tragedies. I mean, we can talk about fentanyl, but you know, fentanyl doesn't even make the top 10 list in terms of deaths across the world. You've got heart disease that's number one there, but heart disease, honestly, we don't talk about as much. I mean, we can pit diabetes is higher, suicide is higher. All these things are higher, but we don't talk. We need to talk, yes, more about them, but we have to be careful in that situation about pitting things against each other, saying, well, we should talk about this, even though this is even more. I'm always afraid. Yes. So in terms of getting back to what you were talking about, Mark, in terms of the deaths, I mean, it's a very sad situation, and yes, it should be highlighted a lot more. I mean, they even made a movie about the deaths, the genocide that was happening in different countries in Africa, and actually a different country in Africa. Remember Hotel in Rwanda? Yeah, I mean, that was about the genocide that was going on, and so I think, you know, yes, if it bleeds, it leads. That's true, but I think it also takes onus on us to really start to look at different things, because the media is going to follow our eyeballs more so than our eyeballs are going to follow the media. Because
you know, Mark, you brought up something interesting. Of course, you can go to Wikipedia. See, the great thing is Google knows everything. Okay, you go to Wikipedia and you find out, because you brought up the Congo, and we don't hear about the Congo because that's an African country. Who cares about it? All right, but according to the Wikipedia, you'll love this. It's 1998, Mark. 5.4 million people were killed in the Congo.
Exactly.
Okay. And 5.4 million people in the Congo doesn't even hit the radar screen in the United States since 1998. So it hasn't been that long. Now they're signing a peace treaty, and so
there's also
way.
sorry.
But Mark, it actually is a big thing. But here's the reality. Okay, we don't give a rat's rear about Africa. Okay, just put it out. The media just doesn't give a rat's rear about Africa. When you watch PBS, you see, what is it? Rick Steves Europe. You ever see Rick Steves Africa? No.
No, but Nick, one of the largest business partners of China is actually Africa. So maybe we need to pay more attention to Africa and all
Well,
of those.
I mean, there should be a Rick Steves Africa. I just got back from Morocco a couple months ago. It's a great country.
We
Great
also
country to travel around. I'm sure there's other countries I just haven't been to in Africa. But the United States, if you go look at any media and see Rick Steves Africa, you won't see it. It'll be Rick Steves Europe. We'll hear a lot about the United Kingdom. I hear about the United Kingdom, I'm about to puke. I'm tired of listening to the Queen.
We also have to be honest about why a lot of that media coverage is there as well, because there are particular narratives and things that we are afraid of, that we still have historically.
Yeah, there's still stereotypes and everything. But Shelby, just really quickly, because I just see the text that Ellen gave and everything. I know we've only got a few more minutes to go anyway and everything. But Dr. Ellen, a couple of quick questions I have for you, and I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and everything. But one of the quick questions, if you can tell folks once again how you can be reached, and if you would share, because we were talking about global community, and I've actually got some friends that are thinking about moving to Costa Rica. The whole pandemic and other things got in the way, so they have not made that move yet. But what is it about Costa Rica that was appealing to you? Because definitely there are some Latin American countries, and I agree with what Nick said, that there are some that are maybe more problematic, but I've heard great things about definitely Costa Rica. I've actually heard great things, ironically, about Colombia and a number of other places. But what is it about Costa Rica that was appealing to you? Because you just said you bought a house there. So there's something appealing.
Yeah. Well, first, people can find me at the Midlife Whisperer, and my book, Rock Your Midlife, is available there. It's also on Amazon. Costa Rica, just to clarify, it is a democracy. They do not have a military. It's a big contrast to Nicaragua. So I was, there is a petty crime, but really it's a safe country. So that was a piece of it. The people, it's pure vida. The people, the local people are just marvelous. When Spain got there, they ran out of money, so it never faced the level of colonization of some of the other Latin American countries. And then they had their revolution, and they made some really smart moves. Of course, they're still protected to some extent by the American government, but it's just an incredibly beautiful country. They have really, I think, a blueprint that a lot of nations could follow. They want to be carbon neutral by 2050, and they're making really good direction and going in that direction. They have 28 national parks, so they really value their nature, their natural resources. It's not overbuilt like a Florida. So I live in Vermont, during the spring and summer, and it's lovely, but we wanted to do the snowbird thing, and it was we went there on vacation, and we just had so much fun, and the people were just so lovely, and real estate investment was also it's a good place in terms of what you get compared to what you would get in like a Florida. So in terms of, they're really trying hard not to let in drug money and things like that. So I mean, in order to buy property, open a bank account, they look you up and down the wazoo. I mean, it was like, I have never had to provide so much documentation to buy a house, to open a bank account. So they're really trying to keep that drug money out. I mean, there is some like in anywhere, but overall, it's just a really beautiful, beautiful country. 300 days of sun. It's 70 to 90 every day. The beaches are gorgeous. They're doing a lot of things that are really, really right. And the people are very friendly. They like foreigners. They feel like it's the best country in the world. And if you feel that way too, well, you are welcome. there's a lot of indigenous people in sort of the native Costa Ricans. So that kind of funnels in a lot of respect for the indigenous. So it's a lot of respect. I never saw husband and wives fighting, people yelling at kids. It's just a very peaceful, I mean, everywhere you walk down the beach and people say, hola, pura vida. There is this general feeling of just warmth and welcomeness. That's just a very grounded, peaceful, and incredibly just geographically gorgeous place.
I
Did
did
you
have
go
a
to
quick
the beaches
question.
in Punta Arenas, or where'd you go?
Where did I go?
Did you go to the beaches in Punta Arenas, or were you in the San Jose, or what area?
We went all over the country, but we bought a home which is what's called Playa Hermosa, which is on the Pacific coast, about 20 minutes from the Liberia airport. That's another issue, is the Liberia airport's very convenient. So for us, it's a 5-hour flight from Vermont, so from Montreal. So it's the beaches are beautiful. We went all over the country, though. We went to the Pacific coast and the Caribbean coast.
Okay, quick question. Because we, we're in the middle of trying to plan a family trip in just a little while anyway. We were looking at Chile and we were also looking at Costa Rica. Can you give me some recommendations? So, because I want to do Costa Rica now because I want to take the whole family because it's a little cheaper, a little shorter.
Well, reach out to me and let's have a conversation about it.
All right.
I can set you up.
All right. Perfect. I need your help to convince the wife.
He's just on the road from you in Durham, North Carolina.
Oh, in Durham, North Carolina.
Okay, yeah. So you could fly into Liberia. I mean, it depends on how old your kids are and what you want to do. But let's have a conversation, and I will set you up.
Awesome.
Sounds like a trip.
All right. Well, I need to go, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate it. It's always a joy. I'm always happy to come back if you want to talk about. I'm a psychologist. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm a board-certified health and wellness coach. I teach self-compassion. I do some Reiki, some energy work. So if you ever need, a little of that pura vida female energy, I love being on. Happy back anytime. Thank you for having me.
Sounds great. Definitely look forward to having you back on at some point to share some of those things that you just mentioned and everything. We can actually go over a little bit because we definitely have nothing going on till later. So if folks wanted to jump in, including Sasha, around what's going on, some of the other world issues that I mentioned earlier, I'd love to hear that because we definitely had some lighter conversation, but definitely we still got another, because it's not till modern investment. So we could literally go for 3 hours, but I'm not trying to do that and everything. But Sasha, if you've got some thoughts around one, what's been talked about, but also what I mentioned earlier, which is this notion that Hamas is not a terrorist organization, which is what the Turkish president claimed and everything. But that is what he said. He said that was one of the quotes that I mentioned earlier. So any thoughts about that? Because definitely that was going on. And then also there's some
pushback. How could they do that? How could a world leader say that? They just crossed a border. This is the stupidest thing I ever heard. They just crossed a border. They randomly shot people that had nothing to do with anything. They cut off people's heads. They kidnapped people. And then the Turkish leader, is that Erdogan or whoever that idiot is?
Yes.
Okay, that moron has the ability to stand up and say they're not a terrorist organization. That's like saying some guy comes into your house, they take a knife, they stab you through the heart, and they say, hey, that's not murder. Come on, that is the dumbest thing. Do we have to even reply to that? Oh, by the way, Sasha, I don't know what your opinion is. I know you're more of a dove than I am. But, that's as Bill Gates would say, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Well, since you feel
that's like saying Donald Trump is sane. He's not sane. I mean,
Well, since you want to yell at people, I'm sure that I mentioned earlier that there are some Arab nations that are upset, and I even said that the Israel ambassador earlier, I mentioned that they were upset at the UN because apparently the UN was asking for peace and asking for a ceasefire. So definitely Israel was having some pushback on that as well.
Here's when they get their ceasefire. They get their ceasefire when all the people in Hamas are eliminated and those bombs stop going into Israel because they're all dead. Then they get their ceasefire mark. Until then, there is no ceasefire. I just don't get, like I always tell people, I said, you want to see what a fight's like? You go to a bar, take your fist, ram it into the biggest guy that's there, and you'll see what happens. You go, oh, and then I got beat up. Oh, poor me. The guy actually hit me back. Give me a bloody break. Haven't these people ever been in fights before?
Well, Nick, you'll be glad to know that apparently
you invade another country. Okay, you slaughter a lot of people, and then you jump back and say, oh, please don't come after me. Give me a bloody break. You know, where do you think you get off on this one? So yes, they'll get their peace when Hamas is eliminated. Next.
Well, apparently there was other
we'll
things that
talk
coming out of the
peace.
Middle East as well, because apparently Israel accused Iran of complicity in the war. So Israel has said that, and definitely the Saudi crown prince has indicated that Israel normalization can resume after the war. So there was conversations between Saudi and Israel, but now they're saying normalization can happen after.
We'll do all this peace talk when Hamas is eliminated. We'll do all the peace talk with Russia when they get their butts out of the Ukraine and they abide by the 1994 Budapest Agreement. Then you can talk all your peace. In the meantime, there is no peace. As you know, no justice, no peace. There is no justice right now, so there's no peace. No peace.
So
go on. Talk about all your peace stuff, Sasha. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So what exactly is the? So Mark, you had stated that somebody didn't claim. What was the claim that you're saying from
Erdogan?
Erdogan said that it was a Mujahideen, and I forget what that word means, but it was basically them pushing back against some Israel attacks that had happened before. So he was claiming that that's with it. It was not a terrorist attack, but it was actually pushback to some infractions that Israel had done to them.
Look, Mark, if these guys had any chutzpah, all right, they would not have gone after civilians. They go after the Israeli army. Then I'd have some respect for them, at least. In other words, like if these guys said, okay, I'll go after the Israeli army and attack the Israeli army, then I'd have some respect for them. I don't have respect for them when they're just going after random citizens. They get zero respect, zero love, zero anything. You know, it's like you go in a bar, okay, you hit the biggest guy in the bar, and for his retaliation, he goes down and hits a little girl. Okay, and you're supposed to have respect for that person? He goes, well, it's retaliation for what you did. Give me a break. You know,
but that's what the claim was, and I was going to get to another person really quickly because I know I want to hear from Sasha and Jacoby as well. We've been hearing from.
If they shot at the Israeli army, I would say okay. You know, I mean, that's what you signed up for, but they're not. They're doing random people. If you do random people, you're a terrorist organization.
Just to point out, there are a lot of organizations trying to make sure that Israel just doesn't go in and run and gun like you're talking about.
And one of them is Israel. Israel says, get your butts out of Gaza, okay? And you know what they do? They're ODD, opposition defiant disorder. I'm not going to do it.
Nick, that's just dumb. Let me tell you why it's dumb. If you do not have the means or the ability to move and you're yelling at people to move, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, you do. I mean, if you have two legs, you move.
Nick, you have the luxury of living in a nice house with books behind you.
You can walk 12 miles.
Sasha has the luxury of having a nice car that he's driving in. Yeah. We all have the ability to up and move if something were to do that. Not a lot of people in an impoverished nation
have that ability.
Jatovi, do you suggest that I would give my nice car to Palestinians to move?
They don't have that ability.
Hey, Jatovi, are you suggesting that I would give?
You're saying,
oh my God, you'll never
talk over each other.
Yeah. You
got I found one interesting thing. Come on. I found one very interesting thing. Whenever Mark or Nick would ask me a question before I would start answer a question, Jatovi jumps right in for 25 minutes. Is this your strategy of Pod TV to get somebody interrupting me all the time?
I didn't hear them ask you a question, but I apologize if I did. Take it away, Sasha.
It was my bad. Actually, I get it. I jumped in. I answered Sasha's question.
Yeah. So, Sasha, take it away. You have the floor. Don't make it about me, though.
Really? Well, the Turkey President Erdogan is too far from us. But you, Jatovi, are very close. You are a monarch. You something mentioned. Prepare to answer my question. You something mentioned in your speech earlier about helpless Russian soldiers. What do you mean by that?
I didn't say helpless Russian soldiers. I said Russian civilians.
Who are the Russian civilians? Are they dying now because of war?
Some probably are. And again,
What do you mean probably are?
Sasha, do I
Are
need
you
to look up
prepared
the
to keep
numbers of
lying
how
all
many-
the time? Are you prepared to
Sasha.
keep lying? Stop it!
Sasha,
There are no
Are you
Russian
saying-
civilians dying in this war,
Sasha.
except from alcoholism, okay?
Sasha, Ukrainians are being killed. So too are some innocent Russian civilians are caught.
Tell
trapped in
me
the middle.
who they are, in what city? What are you lying all the time? Keep, just stop lying, please.
Sasha,
There
hold
are
on a
no
second.
innocent Russian civilians dying in this war, period. And you ought to know. And if you don't, stop lying and shut up your mouth. Okay, Zhitovi?
So again, Sasha,
I
since
don't
you
need to
want me
listen
look
your
up the
answer.
actual-
I don't care about your answer. You are a
So
liar,
therefore,
okay?
You don't care. So Sasha, then I'll ask you, if any Russian civilian is killed within this war, does that matter to you?
There are no civilians. It doesn't matter to me
I
because
asked
there are
you a
no
question.
Russian civilians. I cannot answer hypothetical question because there are no Russian civilians are dying in this war. But there are a lot of Ukrainian civilians being killed every day. And you are not saying even one word of that, but you're talking about non-existent Russian civilians being killed in this war. Zhitovi, stop lying, please.
Hey, Sasha, just really quickly. Sasha, hold on a second. Sasha, really quickly. As I recall, there were some attacks that were launched from Ukraine to Russia. Are you saying that those attacks were only to the military targets and that they might
Yes,
not have hit cities?
you got it right, Mark. That's absolutely correct. That's why not one Russian civilian was suffered as a result of Ukrainian attacks.
Okay, so they're only hitting Ukrainian military
Yeah.
targets. They're not hitting any cities at all, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. If you look at the results, even the ATACMS missiles, what they're now using, they're using it to destroy Russian the fleet, the Black Sea fleet, or the helicopters, the helicopters which fighting Ukrainians, or planes, the warplanes. So this is all what they're using these weapons for, but never, ever they hit Russian civilian infrastructure, or even there could be some collateral death.
So what about the
Russians.
Russians
It
that
never
were
happened.
killed? What about the civilians that were killed on Russian soil? Are they just all Ukrainians as well?
What civilians on the Russian soil are you talking about? Ukraine never crossed the border. They are attacking only Russians who are on Ukrainian soil, and there are not Russian civilians. Okay? Did you get that in your head?
Are you talking about the hit that happened in Moscow? Because that's not in Ukraine. That was...
Yeah, and there was no single Russian
they're claiming that there are 80 Russian civilians that have been killed.
Who does that? Who does that? Who does it? Where did you read that? Show me the source.
I mean, Al Jazeera has it.
Come on, Al Jazeera. How dare you are to quote Al Jazeera on this program?
UN News has it.
Who?
UN News?
UN is a terrorist organization. You got
So,
it?
in other words, what you're telling me, Sasha, is that regardless who says it, you will already claim that they are lying.
Absolutely, 100%.
So therefore, in your mind, if a Russian civilian dies and you see it and you hear the report of it, it's a lie.
No, if it's verified by international sources,
So
if
you got
find
so
it,
the UN is not
you have to
national
find
source.
it, my
all
friend.
these other individuals. NPR isn't a national source. So you
My
got all
friend,
these individuals.
You
that
cannot
verify.
follow all the sources in the world. You can follow a few sources. Let's see,
What
BBC,
source-
New York
what source
Times.
would you like?
I'm telling you, listen. It's BBC, Wall Street Journal, New York
reported it.
Times, The Economist, and a few other publications.
BBC
No one
reported
of this. BBC? I never seen it.
That's my point. It
What's your
doesn't
point?
matter to you, Sasha, if a Russian civilian dies. It doesn't matter who.
No, you don't tell
All I'm
me
saying-
what's my opinion. My opinion I keep to
telling you,
myself.
Sasha.
Talk about yourself. So you
That's what I'm
are
telling you. I
concerned
am
about
talking
Russian
about myself.
civilians.
I am
Okay, you're
talking about myself,
concerned.
Sasha.
You are concerned about Russian civilians
I am
being
concerned
killed in
about
that war.
innocent
I'm
civilians.
telling you, there are no innocent civilians, Russians, who are being killed in this war. You know that, but you are lying and keep lying, and I'm getting tired and sick of that. When Ukrainians
lying.
were being killed already, 500,000 Ukrainians were
There
being
are-
killed, and you're
there are
talking about
more
some civilians
Than
who
10,000 Ukrainians who have passed
they
away.
died.
due to
Okay,
this war.
Russians
And that
are
is
dying
all.
only from one reason,
There are
from
more than
alcoholism.
20,000
There is no other
who've been injured.
reason. Okay, you
That's
are spreading Russian propaganda and
I'm
Russian
not.
point of view. Go and read your
No,
Jazeera
I'm not.
and all that. It's enough for me. Thank you. Bye.
Just really quickly, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts about this, and we're getting ready to wind down and everything. But there are two articles I was going to get to. One involved a member of the squad, and I know there's been some critique about Representative Tlaib, but apparently they were asking for an independent investigation. So her exact quote is, "I cannot uncritically accept Israel's denial of responsibility as a fact." And there are some folks, including a very conservative publication, the New York Post, that are getting on her case about that because they are thinking that she is being very much on the side of Hamas and all along those lines. But I don't think that's the case. I just think that she's asking for an investigation and an investigation of both sides, which seems fair in any war situation.
We've lost all reasoning, ability to reason, especially in this situation. Just as Sasha's so agitated if you point out that somebody, a bystander on the other side, a bystander was killed that he may see wrong with. It's like saying, you know, okay, well, if I like this group and somebody's injured, then I'm gonna, you know, go to nth degree and forget about anything that they've done or anything that's happened to the other side. We've just gotten to that. That's a horrible place to be. So what she's asking for example, is okay. Yes, she's in agreement. She doesn't like the violence. She's in agreement. She doesn't like Hamas. She's in agreement that she doesn't like this and like that, but she doesn't say it a particular way. So I'm going to hate her. That's what they're complaining about. Then she's asking for, okay, well, because of the history between the Palestinian people and Israel, the people of Gaza and Israel, is there a potential that, you know, a way to come to a peaceful solution that we all want in the future? Can we look at some of the histrionics that are there? That's all she's asking for. And that's understandable. Fareed Zakaria did a great piece about talking about the histrionics of Netanyahu and everything that he's done. And did that play a role? We don't know. It's quite possible. This war in the past 15, there's been a war every 3 years in the past 15 years. So there are 5 wars in 15 years between Israel and what's going on in Gaza. The place is in destruction. I mean, it's a very impoverished nation that doesn't have a chance. And yes, there's a terrorist organization that's grown its roots there because it's convinced the people, just like a gang does to a child, that, hey, we're your family. We're going to take care of you, even though we're going to, you know, sell drugs to the people that live right next door to you, or we're going to kill the people that. It's just,
and that's that whole quote, and that's that whole conversation that I think is the point that Erdogan was trying to make, and I heard that definitely Sasha knocked that as well. But his exact quote, and I did see what Lee put out there, is that Hamas is not a terrorist organization; it's a liberation group Mujahideen waging a battle to protect its land and people. And apparently he told lawmakers from his ruling AK party that. So he was definitely using some of the language that they would know, because it is language that it is Arabic and part of their own language. And it's a, according to Lee, was a word denoting those who fight for their faith and everything. So like
think about how crazy this is that we cannot understand the nuances anymore. And how ironic it is that we're about to go into a presidential election. Right now, the Republican Party is doing primaries. Do they say the same thing in the primaries as they say in the general election? No. What Erdogan did was talk to his party and say this in a particular way that his party understood, and that could help him in. And then he goes to the general populace and has to say something different. I mean, it's the same way. We do it naturally. When we go, Mark, when we go and hang around Black people, we say different things that we do in Black people that we say in front of a group that's, homogenous and with, all different cultures.
It's that whole concept of code switching, and definitely politicians code switch all the time. And that's that whole conversation. So we have. Yeah,
I can't. I mean, yes, I believe Hamas is a terrorist organization. I believe what they did was an atrocity. And I think we all agree on that. But at some point, we have to agree on that in terms of, I believe that you believe this. I can't toss it in the trash just because you want to think of a peaceful solution so the Palestinian people can have a place to live. I can't think that you've thrown that idea out the window. I can't think that, hey, you've thrown that idea out the window because you believe that the Israeli or the FDI or is it IDA, the Israeli Defense?
Trying to think of the name of the organization. But I know what you're talking about, right?
But I can't throw that out the window if you're wanting them to wait because you know about the Hamas tunnels that you just learned about, and you figure that that's going to be a treacherous situation for any ground attack. And there has to be a huge plan in place, because what if they have that whole ground area blasted, set up for, to trigger mines. So now you killed more of the Israeli individuals in this Israeli military, which is even,
what I've heard from some media sources is that particular tunnels are so mined out, it's not even funny. So like I said, you are definitely thinking, based on what I'm hearing from other media sources, that there are it's going to be a bloodbath down there, possibly, if it
matter
is
of fact,
as they say it is.
I think it was General Petraeus who even talked about they need patience. They need another avenue to go in. It may not even be that, hey, we bring hellfire on you throughout this whole thing and try and lay waste to everybody, because that's killing everybody. Why not take that step back and then really begin to infiltrate and do, think of a better plan, because then that protects the Palestinian people or the people of Gaza. Because then if you think about the Arab nations, they're all upset because of the fact you're treating them as pawns. That's all you're doing.
Being treated as pawns, and this is the last thing I was going to bring up to the panel as well, but I'll bring it up to you and then we'll wrap up and everything. But apparently there is a group, and actually Nick alluded to it earlier, that could be problematic for the Democratic Party, and that is the situation with the migrants. Because even in New York, there was a Siena College Research Institute poll that was released on yesterday that says that 84% of New Yorkers think the state's migrant mess is a serious problem. So that could be problematic, not just in New York, but other states that have gotten an influx of these migrants from places like Florida and Texas and other places. So I'm thinking that this could be an issue that could be problematic in the presidential race, depending on how folks decide to vote on that particular issue. And we know there are a number of other issues, including the economy and pocketbook issues and all along those lines, that could not be the deciding factor. But a lot of people will be paying attention to this part of the conversation as well.
It's another political tool that people are going to utilize to say, well, they're not doing their job. Well, okay. If you get in office, what are you going to do? Because when Trump got in office, the only thing he kept yelling was, hey, we're going to put up a wall. And then he builds partially, I mean, the wall we already know doesn't work because, hey, look at what Hamas has done with the whole tunneling system.
Right.
Look at our history behind walls in the first place. Look at the tunnel system that's already there where the walls are. On top of that, we want to complain about fentanyl, but that all comes through major ports of entry already. So we need to actually focus on the major ports of entry rather than, hey, look, let's all go this way.
Jacoby, it's like I said before, if you look at our, and I'm not saying this as a stereotype or a negative, but if you look at our construction crews and you look at our building crews, the vast majority of them are significantly made up of our Latin American brothers and sisters and everything. And if I'm building a wall and you tell me to build a wall and it's to keep my people out, if you think I'm not going to build all kind of trap doors, you'd have lost your mind, because I'm going to be building all kinds of trap doors to make sure that my folks can get through in various ways, because I'm the one building this alleged wall and everything. So like I said, I'm just looking at just here in North Carolina, the crews, and every time that I look around, even here where I'm at our lawn crew, it's significantly made up of a Latin American population. And I'm thinking that's probably nationally true as well.
Yeah, it's, I mean, we just got, instead of, we are at a point where we're using all these problems or the problems that are there. We create more problems because we just use it as a political tool to yell at the other person that you don't do anything while not actually doing anything. Because, you know, if I don't fix the immigration problem and, oh my goodness, we have a Republican president, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to say the Republicans didn't fix the problem. But if I don't fix it and there's going to be a Democratic president, you know what? I can use it and say the Democrats didn't do it. Well, we need processing. So we need the whole, there's just so many ways that we could try and work on the problem and think of ways to work on the problem, but we think of ways to destroy and tear things down.
You know, no doubt about that. And on a lighter note, as we head out the door and everything, maybe to solve the world problems, we can just get Dr. Allen to do a astrological reading on everybody and all along those lines. So that can solve the entire problems, because maybe we can find out why Trump is the way he is and why Biden is the way he is, and solve it in that sense, because she can do not the newspaper reading, but the full reading and all along those lines. And we can figure out what's going on in that space.
As long as she doesn't do the Ouija board reading.
No, we don't want that. Not at all. On that note, we're ready to get on out of here. I don't think there's a guest tomorrow, but then again, I could be wrong once again, but we'll find out and continue these conversations. Actually, despite and like I said, there are parts of astrology that I actually am a devout believer in. Other parts that I'm going like I don't quite get it and understand it, but I did feel that Dr. Ellen, just like the guest yesterday, was an interesting guest, and she did raise some interesting concerns around health and the midlife crisis, which can be a very real thing and everything. So I thought she was a great guest, and hopefully folks will be getting in touch with her. I know Jacoby will be getting in touch with her because he's trying to figure out how he's going to get to Costa Rica and have a Costa Rican vacation.
Yep. I mean, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Cool.